community. We hired our first policy director. We launched our Declaration of Nonprofit Rights, and we developed our policy platform. We also changed our name. So this, in fact, is the first annual meeting under the name Nonprofit New York. And we moved to the Ford Foundation Center for Social Justice. Like you, though, we're not in our home today, as the building is closed. We wrote our race equity story. We diversified our staff, our board, and our programming. We revised our signature key areas of nonprofit excellence and launched the Best Nonprofit Conference, the only conference focused on nonprofit management best practices in our area. We won key victories on behalf of our sector, including eliminating the state UBIT tax on commuter benefits and stopping an unconstitutional donor disclosure law. Our vendor program improves our members' bottom line, and in fiscal year 2019, which went to September 2019, we helped our members save over $4 million. Not only did we do a lot, but what we did also made an impact. Our full annual report is now available on our website. Now a quick look at our agenda for this afternoon. We had a very different program planned, but that was before the world changed. When we announced a few weeks ago that we had decided then, just as a precaution, to move our programming online until further notice, and now it's the way for many of us. So today we will get to business, including the announcement of our next president and CEO. We'll report on our financials for the past year, and we will elect members to the board. We'll also have a conversation about what we know about the impact of COVID-19 on our area's nonprofit community. And I know we're all looking forward to that part which Chai Chindasurat will be leading, especially as whatever it is that's going on seems to change every 5 minutes. Let's go on to the next slide, if we might. I'd like to start by thanking our event sponsors for generously supporting this meeting and for their flexibility as we continue to navigate how coronavirus is impacting our sector. So we are sponsored today by Mutual of America, one of Nonprofit New York's member vendor partners, providing our members with access to retirement benefits and fee waivers. Namely is an HR platform whose mission is to help mid-sized companies build a better workplace. Staples, a longtime member vendor partner of Nonprofit New York, provides our members discounts on over 30,000 products and office supplies. Bank United provides a wide range of commercial and consumer banking services. And Denham Wolf Real Estate Services, empowering organizations to take a thoughtful, mission-first approach to real estate. Now, in January, Sharon Staples stepped down as president and executive director. Thank you. As president and executive director of Nonprofit New York. During her 4 years with us, Sharon inspired our team and nonprofit leaders all over. She was a staunch champion of our nonprofit community. Melkis Alvarez-Baez, since January, has stepped in as acting president. And she's been with us for more than 8 years. And using that experience, she has provided really important stability to our team and has been a consistent face for our members, our partners, and funders. And I know that you can't do it with a cheer, but let's have a virtual cheer for Melkis, who has done a fabulous job leading the organization. And she will continue to do that for the next few months. So in June, on June 1st, we will welcome a new president and CEO. Meg Barnett will build on the momentum that Nonprofit New York has built. Meg is currently serving as General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at Planned Parenthood of Greater New York. During her tenure at Planned Parenthood, Meg led the development of a new nationally recognized health center in Queens and led the merger of Planned Parenthood of New York City and 4 other Planned Parenthood affiliates in New York. As I said, Meg will join us on June 1st, and she will work closely with our excellent board and exceptional staff to examine future strategies while leveraging our past success. So I want also, normally I would ask our board members to stand and would recognize them. So let's recognize them virtually as well. Each of members of our board provides very important support for the organization and works hard to meet the needs in the governance role. And also to thank our staff. You can see Taina and Chai and Melkis and Meg, soon to be the leader of that group, on your screens. But we're also joined by the rest of our staff group, and I want to thank them. They have shown what working as a team is like when you don't have an office to go to. And I know that's something we're all experiencing at the moment. I'm really proud to serve as board chair and to have the opportunity to lead such a fabulous group of people, both at the board and our staff. Thank you all for your support, and look forward to continuing to work with you to solve the world's biggest problems, to advance the future of all our communities, and transform the lives of countless people. Thank you. And now I'm pleased to introduce Nonprofit New York's treasurer, Charlene Lanevsky, who is a partner at KPMG. Charlene.
Thank you, Ian.
Sorry, this is Melkis. Before we turn it over to you, Meg, did you want to say a couple of...
Oh, I apologize. I completely messed up. It wasn't written on my piece of paper, so I didn't do it.
No
Meg,
problem.
please.
No, I just thank you so much. I want to say that I am absolutely thrilled to join this dynamic team of staff and board members, and I am very, very eager to get to work on behalf of all of you in this creative, resilient, powerful sector, especially during these immensely challenging times. So I'm honored, and I can't wait to get to work.
Thank you, Meg, and thank you, Melkis. Charlene, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Meg and Ian and Melkis. So I am happy to report for the fiscal year ended September 30, 2019, Nonprofit New York received an unmodified opinion on the financial statements from Condon, O'Mara, McGinty, and Donnelly, our independent auditors. The full audited financial statements and the tax form 990 for fiscal year 2019 are available on Nonprofit New York's website, www.nonprofitnewyork.org. Couple of points. Our operations grew from $2.1 million in 2018 to $2.3 million in 2019. Because of the investments we made in our strategic plan, we finished the year with a decrease in net assets of approximately $226,000. Our program expenses represented about 72% of our total expenditures, as you could see on the screen. Our balance sheet remained strong, and as of 9/30/19, our cash and investment portfolio were about $1.1 million, and we had a reserve to cover about 5.6 months of operating costs. That was a look back for the year ended September 30, 2019. 2020 has certainly posed its challenges for all nonprofit organizations, including Nonprofit New York. As we all navigate the challenges ahead, we need your continued support as members and funders, now more than ever, to deliver critical programs and information to you on a timely basis. Together, we are a relentless collective force for good. Now I'd like to introduce the board secretary and president and CEO of God's Love We Deliver, Karen Pearl, who will present the slate of board members for election. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Charlene. We are now about to start our nomination process. And here's how the Nonprofit New York Board nominating process works. Our committee on the board interviews a number of potential candidates for the Nonprofit New York Board. This year, we proposed 3 new nominees and recommended the renomination of 4 existing board members whose 3-year terms are up. These 7 candidates were presented to the Nonprofit New York Board of Directors at the December 18 board meeting, and the slate is unanimously recommended by our committee on the board. So here they are. The Board of Directors proposes the re-election of the following members for another 3-year term: Rhonda Kotelchuk, Roland Lewis, Carolyn McLaughlin, and Emily Smith. In addition, the Board of Directors proposes the election of 3 new board members for a 3-year term. And those 3 people are Dr. Reverend Chloe Breyer from the Interfaith Center of New York, Peter G. from The Door, and Meredith Mascara from Girl Scouts of Greater New York. Now, the challenge is going to be to conduct this election electronically, but we are up to that. So here you go. Current dues paying nonprofit members, or as we like to say, members in good standing, may cast 1 vote per organization. So please vote today, even if you've previously submitted a proxy vote. We know who submitted proxy votes. We will not double count. We just want to make sure we get as many votes as is appropriate from all of you in attendance today. So I'm going to ask for a motion by a member in good standing to nominate the slate of prospective board members. I'll ask you to please write your name and organization, and that you are putting forth the motion to accept this slate in the chat box. And Melkus, I can't see the chat box, so you'll have to tell me if we're good. We're good?
Yes. Allison Hauser, Girls on the Run, has made a motion to accept.
Great, thank you. And then I will ask for a second. So again, somebody has to write second in that chat box with your name and organization. Oh, good, I see that now. Great, so we've got a second. Okay, I will open this up for discussion. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I think Melkus is going to be putting a poll up that will appear on your screen. If your organization has more than 1 representative logged in, just please designate 1 person to vote. And then submit your vote.
Thank you. And I will project the results as soon as they are done.
Okay. Well, then while Melkus is doing that, I want to also say that as we welcome these new board members and re-up a class of board members, we are also very, very thankful for the work that has been done by a few board members who are now rotating off the board. So with sadness, we say thank you, and also a fond farewell, not from the organization, just from the board, for Pat Kozu from the Century Foundation, Angela Sun-Pinsky from Google, and Eileen Torres from BronxWorks. We thank them very much for their contributions to Nonprofit New York and the nonprofit community, and look forward to continuing work with them in new and exciting ways. So Melkus, do we have the original vote?
Yes, we do.
Great.
Okay, so I am sharing the results, and when we add these with the proxies that we had received, we are good.
Good. So I want to thank everybody for participating. As you can see, the votes were tallied and the nominees have been accepted. So we welcome our new board members, and again, a fond farewell to those who have finished their service on the board. And with that, I turn it back to Melkus.
Thanks, Karen. So now we're going to have a 20-second commercial break from our overall sponsor, Mutual of America. You will have to bear with me if the sound is not great. We will follow up with the video, and it's only 20 seconds long. Thank you. So to kick off our conversation about COVID-19, mobilizing to support nonprofits is our policy director, Chai Jindasurat.
Thank you, Melkus. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. I am so honored and humbled to be meeting with all of you today, right now. For those I haven't met yet, my name is Chai Jindasurat. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the policy director here at Nonprofit New York. And for our discussion today, I'm also so grateful to be joined by Pat Swan of the New York Community Trust, who will speak to philanthropy's response to COVID-19 and the NYC COVID-19 Response and Impact Fund, and our city comptroller, Scott Stringer, who will join us shortly to share remarks on how the city has been responding to support nonprofits. So I'll be checking my phone for an imminent text for his arrival. And as everyone has said many times, the past few weeks have been hard and they've been a lot. I've heard devastating stories about staff layoffs and organization closures. I have seen our already under-resourced sector turn their entire operations upside down to protect our community members and staff. And I have seen incredible organizing. I've seen a united and powerful nonprofit sector come through and advocate. So let's do a quick recap and see where we go from here. Our original plan for the annual meeting was to have an amazing panel of sector leaders help us launch the campaign to advance nonprofits. Oops, which was our actionable which is our actionable policy platform based on Nonprofit New York's Declaration of Nonprofit Rights. The campaign to advance nonprofits came out of a lot of listening, researching, and analysis. For those who were at last year's annual meeting, you'll recall that our declaration states that in order for nonprofits to thrive and be able to serve our communities well, we have a right to sustainable financial resources, we have a right to engage in advocacy, we have a right to champion equity, and we have a right to be powerful forces for change. The past few weeks have reinforced just how salient these rights are for our sector. And I'll try and ground our discussion this afternoon in these rights as best as possible. So our dedicated COVID-19 mobilizing and policy advocacy efforts really began for Nonprofit New York about a month ago. But at the same time, I have to name that Asian serving organizations started sounding the alarm in January when Asian businesses and neighborhoods first felt the economic hit of COVID-19. The organizations serving these communities and businesses saw an increased demand for services, both because people stopped going to Asian businesses and because anti-Asian bias incidents increased. Then, about 4 weeks ago, a member of our Policy Leadership Council asked if Nonprofit New York could issue a public statement to funders on behalf of the sector to be flexible with organizations that may miss deliverables due to COVID-19 or struggle to meet reporting deadlines and requirements. We agreed and began listening to our members and sector leaders about their concerns and what they would like us to say to our colleagues in philanthropy. The stories I began to hear were alarming. Most leaders were immediately wondering how to support those in our communities most vulnerable to the virus, the elderly, the immunocompromised, and those whose livelihood required them to be physically present at their job to be paid. And we know that our community members who cannot work remotely are disproportionately Black and brown. Next, nonprofits were concerned about the immediate financial fallout of our city closing. We also know that 40% of organizations have no contingency funds. Canceled events and decreased fee-for-service participation meant nonprofit leaders had to consider scenarios ranging from laying off staff, making payroll, paying vendors on time, to the ability to cover rent and plans for possible eviction. Government-funded organizations were desperately seeking guidance from the city and state on how to shift their scopes of work and if they would be paid. Our message to funders called them to center equity and prioritize those most vulnerable during this pandemic, to leverage their positions of influence to pressure government to support nonprofit contractors, include us in relief efforts, and speak out against racism and xenophobia, to proactively communicate with their grantees, to alleviate reporting and restrictions and be flexible with deliverables, and to fund the sector's COVID-19 needs, rapid response, unrestricted funding, and working capital. And we saw them respond. So many funders sent messages of support and began shifting their funding models to quickly reach organizations, which Pat will be able to speak to in just a bit. At the same time, I saw nonprofits jumping into advocacy. Arts and culture organizations like New Yorkers for Culture and the Arts and Dance NYC, whose members were canceling events and their gig artists were out of work overnight. Human service organizations like HSC, UNH, the Chinese American Planning Council, FPWA, organizing together to get clear guidance from government funders, while all seeing our city rapidly and necessarily close, socially distance, and halt all economic activity. Nonprofit New York organized a sector-wide advocacy call to see where we all were in this. And nonprofits were, in all honesty, freaking out. Our charge was clear. We needed to send a bold, comprehensive, powerful message to our government leaders with a list of specific demands that would allow our sector to both survive and serve our communities. The demands for our government leaders were to honor their commitments to our sector and include us in recovery efforts. I'm grateful to so many of you who shared your stories, helped with drafting, and worked to make our letter comprehensive, inclusive, and actionable. From Alejandra Duque Cifuentes from Dance NYC flagging some ableist language within the first draft, to Marissa Martin of the Advocacy Institute sharpening our recommendations, Joanne Yu of the Asian American Federation doing late night co-editing in a Google Doc, MJ Okma of HSC helping us avoid stereotypes of human services, to Andrew Wallace of Funders for LGBTQ Issues for helping to create a narrative that speaks to this very difficult time that we are in. And to our environmental and conservancy members who followed up asking us to be more inclusive of their needs. Thank you for holding us accountable. To date, over 460 organizations have signed on to that letter, which has been sent to our deputy mayors, the comptroller, public advocate, Speaker Johnson, the mayor's office of contract services, the Office of Management and Budget, and many council members and agencies. So where do we stand now? We did a pulse poll for our members, and the data we're sharing here is from 109 responses as of yesterday. And today we're at 128 responses and we'll continue to monitor. According to the preliminary results of our COVID-19 pulse poll, 66% of respondents have had a significant or heavy impact, with close to a quarter having a moderate impact due to COVID-19. Close to 3/4 of members said the spread of COVID-19 will significantly or heavily impact their ability to carry out their mission. 66% of respondents have seen reduced revenues. 84% of respondents have canceled events. Almost all respondents are very concerned about what the economic fall will mean for giving and foundation support. So, how are philanthropy and government responding to this advocacy? As some of you may have seen, philanthropy has launched emergency response funds, probably the most notable of which is the NYC COVID-19 Response and Impact Fund. Federally, Congress passed the Families First Coronavirus Act, which mandates paid sick leave and family leave with a payroll tax credit so nonprofits can also benefit. And this is a direct result of our collective advocacy. We called nonprofits to action to demand we be included in the federal economic recovery bill. We are, after all, 16% of the private workforce in New York City, and nationally we contribute over $900 billion to GDP. We called the Senate passed the CARE Act around midnight last night with a $350 billion loan program that includes nonprofits of up to 500 employees and an industry stabilization fund for those larger nonprofits with more than 500 employees. We're now anxiously waiting for the House vote. The Small Business Administration extended their disaster relief grants to nonprofits. The state placed a moratorium on evictions and extended tax abatements for late filers. The state expanded paid sick leave. We saw the comptroller send a letter to the mayor asking that budgeted contract levels be honored for human service contracts. We saw a letter from council members Jimmy Van Bramer and Laurie Cumbo asking the same for the arts. The city issued guidance after guidance to contracted human service providers, finally designating them as essential workers and later streamlining administrative requirements. The city created an employee retention grant, which we're trying to expand to more than 5 employees so more nonprofits can access. Nonprofits have been included in all of these efforts because you made your needs known and because you advocated for yourselves. Now, where will we go from here? Nonprofit New York is shifting all program to best meet our members' needs to weather this pandemic. We've heard loud and clear the need to identify funding opportunities for nonprofits, from grants to lines of credit, and provide regular information about government relief efforts. But also HR and legal support for the very challenging conversation about reducing staff, best practices for when our staff tests positive, scenario planning, how to interpret force majeure and if it covers canceled events, peer support for transitioning to online and virtual work, and remote work standards. And this is only the beginning. The state and city will have to implement the federal relief efforts. We still need firm commitments at both city and state levels for all organizations. We must identify what gaps remain, and we must continue to be visible, vigilant, and powerful. We must also continue to convene to see how we can support each other, from donating cleaning and personal protective equipment supplies to those organizations that need it, to sharing models in this new reality. Please hold us accountable through this. We are here for you. I've learned so much from incredible leaders on how to be more inclusive, on the needs of specific sectors, and that is what we are here for. We value equity and inclusion, and I mean that. Let us know how we can do better, because together, we are a relentless collective force for good. Sorry, it's been an intense couple weeks. I'm now thrilled to turn it over to Pat Swan, Senior Program Officer at the New York Community Trust, responsible for community development, civic affairs, and capacity building for the nonprofit sector. So welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Chai. I've had a 20-year relationship with Nonprofit New York, and I am always in awe. I am even more so in awe now under these circumstances, and also, you know, huge respect and just amazing high regard for this sector and the way that the nonprofit sector is responding to this crisis. And I look forward to the next chapter of my relationship under Meg's leadership and with the amazing staff and board of Nonprofit New York. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of the program today. I am going to talk about the New York City COVID-19 Response and Impact Fund. I have a lot less in terms of specific information about the broader philanthropic scene, but I can say that from conversations that I've been in on and from what I have, you know, sort of anecdotally heard, there is a real commitment to be responsive, to be flexible, and that goes from the national level, where I know the Council on Foundations has put out a statement about how foundations should respond to their grantees in this crisis that has now 370 signatories, to the local level, where in Philanthropy New York, where I am a member of the board, we also are convening and sharing best practices and talking about how we can be as strong and supportive a partner as we can be to the nonprofit sector in this tumultuous time. So, so let me say a little bit about the New York City COVID-19 Response and Impact Fund. To date, $80 million has been raised. There is a really long list. I'm so impressed by the generosity of the philanthropic sector. I could name a few, but I know I'll leave some folks off, but Bloomberg Philanthropies, Carnegie, Ford, Mellon, JPB, Doris Duke, Revson, Estee Lauder, Robin Hood, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Laurie M. Tisch Illumination Fund, UJA Federation, Wells Fargo, and we continue to fundraise, so the list will be even longer. Of the $80 million that's been raised to date, $50 million has been designated for grants. The grant component of the fund will be administered by New York Community Trust. $30 million has been allocated for interest-free loans. The loan component will be administered by Nonprofit Finance Fund. I'll talk about the grant program. The loan component I know less about, but I'll certainly try to pass on whatever information I'm able to find out. And then Chai and Melkus can see that it gets disseminated to all of you. So the grant program. Grants will range from $10,000 to $250,000. In this first phase, the priority will be direct services in response to immediate needs and helping arts and culture organizations stay viable in the face of significant revenue loss due to canceled performances and events. The grants will cover a 12-week period. Eligible uses for the grants will be personnel, equipment, and operating expenses that are a function of the crisis, the coronavirus crisis. So in other words, rent and other general operating expenses are not eligible, but to the extent that there are costs connected to specialized cleaning and disinfecting and things of that nature, that will be an eligible use. Organizations must be a 501c3. They must be based in New York City with a track record of programs and services for New York City residents. Organizations that, in order to be eligible, must be a recipient of some government funding. Can be city, state, member items, federal, but it must be, the organization must be a recipient of government funding to be eligible. The organization to be eligible must have no more than $20 million in private funding. Grants are not available for lost or delayed revenue due to galas and fundraising events that have been canceled or postponed. That will be more appropriately considered under the loan component of the program. And also on the loan program, the loans will range from $250,000 to $3 million. Eligible uses will include, as I mentioned, postponed fundraising events, delays in government contract payments, increased expenses due to delivering services as a result of the crisis that are likely to be reimbursed at some point in the future. And to be eligible for the loan component, an organization must be a 501c3, must be based in New York City, must be a recipient of government funding, must have an annual operating budget between $3 million and $35 million, and must have a track record of delivering programs and services for New York residents. So I wanted to mention Robinhood a little bit. I've spoken with or communicated with the folks at Robinhood, and they are, in addition to contributing to this fund, they've sort of reanimated their Robinhood Relief Fund and are accepting applications for that specifically. And the website for that is robinhood.org/relief, RELIEF -effort, EFFORT. And there's more, there's more funds. As people know, there are a handful that have sprouted up. I am not going to pretend to be an expert on all of them, and so I can take questions now on the New York City COVID-19 Response and Impact Fund, and anything that I don't know. As you can imagine, a lot of this is still evolving, but anything that I don't know, I'll take down questions and try to get answers for everybody. So Chai, I'm not sure, are you going to moderate for me the questions that come in on the chat box?
Yes, so I believe the comptroller is imminently going to join us.
Okay.
His staff is texting with me now. So as soon as he joins, we'll introduce him. He'll make his remarks, and then we'll have a dialogue. But I think I can actually check the Q&A right now for any questions that have come up. Okay, so I see a question about applications are rolling until it looks like May 30th. Do you have an idea of how quick a turnaround time it will be from application and decision to funds?
The goal is to, between submission and decision, 2 weeks. The plan is to make decisions on a weekly basis and to have a 2-week span between the time of the submission and the time of the decision.
Wow.
And then we're also going to be wire transferring grants out of this fund.
Okay, great. All right, so I got notice that we have just a couple more minutes before the comptroller joins us. So I see there's some, so I would just ask folks to please use the Q&A function. I do see some direct chats to our panelists, which is fine. I can scan those really quickly as well. So it looks like we have a couple technical questions about, could you please again review the range of grant sizes, and then a question about who will be deciding who gets the awards.
The grants range from as small as 10,000 up to 250,000.
Okay.
And there are going to be 2 separate RFPs and 2 separate grant review committees. So I mentioned this 2-pronged priority, one for direct services, primarily human services in response to the crisis, and then another that addresses the challenges to arts and culture organizations. So there'll be 2 separate RFPs and 2 separate grant committees for each of those 2 prongs of the fund. And for people who are familiar at all with the trust, we have a standard minimum operating budget of $250,000 for arts organizations. Anything below that we typically don't consider. That's not going to apply for this fund.
Got it. I have another question about potential new programming to create in response to the increase in anti-Asian racism because of COVID-19. Is that something that will be under consideration for this new trust?
The best answer I can give to that now is to say that probably not, at least not right now, because the immediate priority is for direct services. However, we realize that this fund, which again, the trust is one of the foundations that are part of the decision making. There's a whole there's a whole group of foundations that are part of this, and these are the priorities they've decided on. But the New York Community Trust certainly is going to continue our grant making and will be responding through our normal grant making process to other issues that may not fit within the priorities as they're determined for this fund. And so certainly anti-Asian bias and trying to address that issue is certainly one that we're going to be considering proposals for.
Thank you, Pat. And so I see that our City Comptroller, Scott Stringer, has joined us under the Comptroller staff member, Robert Young's name. So you'll see that, that box if you scroll for the panelists. Comptroller Stringer, I think all you have to do is unmute yourself. And then we'll be able to see when you do that. Okay, great. So thank you so much for joining Nonprofit New York's annual meeting. You are speaking virtually to what looks like 270 participants, nonprofits across the city. So welcome.
Well, thank you very, very much. And I'm really glad to be here with all of you. First, I want to say thank you very much. The work that you've always been about has been direct services to the most vulnerable people in the city. You have been the service delivery conduit to so many people, from kids to seniors. And who would have thought how important your role would be now? You are critical to getting us beyond the virus, and you're critical to saving lives. And I want you to know that I truly believe that government has got to be your partner. We cannot be a roadblock. We can't waste a day tying up the resources that you need. And that is why we sent the letter saying that you should be held harmless on the contracts. That is why we registered 200 human services contracts in one day. And that is why, with Jessica Silver from my office, we are so committed to working with you every single day until we get through this. Look, the stimulus package is, I mean, there's relief for nonprofits, but it only works if we get our fair share. It's really wrong that right now places like Idaho and Utah would get more money per capita than we would, but that's the Trump world we live in. So we have a lot more advocacy to do in Washington. But I want you to know that my office is here for you, and we want to work every day to make sure that you're doing your good work. The future of the city is in your hands in a lot of ways. Agencies, government agencies can only do so much, and sometimes they do more harm than good. But we are working with this administration to advocate for your agencies, and I need to hear from you. I need to hear from you every single day about what we can be thinking about and what we could be doing so that you can do your work on the ground. And I know getting cash to you in the quickest way possible is one of the priorities. So I hear you, and we're trying to take action to meet your needs.
Great. And thank you so much for that. I think the sector has been so grateful for that letter and your leadership. And so a couple things as moderator, I'd like to ask folks to send in questions to the Q&A for the comptroller or for Pat. One initial question that I have, Comptroller Stringer, is we've seen a lot of commitments for human service organizations, but Nonprofit New York is sector-wide. And so we have a very diverse membership that also includes a lot of arts organizations, schools, faith organizations, and environmental organizations, just to name a few. And so we're hoping that we can get the same kind of commitments for those organizations. And I wonder if you could speak to some of the conversations your office has been having with those various sectors, and any ideas about what kind of relief might be coming for them.
Well, first of all, one of the reasons why I wanted to be on this call today is I need to hear from a broad section of not-for-profit agencies. Obviously, when the virus broke, our first instinct was go to where the services were needed to save lives. But that doesn't mean that we do that at the expense of other important not-for-profit organizations. Not-for-profits are going to work with children. School is closed. Not-for-profits that have to continue to meet the cultural needs of our city. Obviously, a lot of our museums, a lot of our small art nonprofits are also looking at expending resources on Zoom and other ways to reach people, to give them the full opportunity to be a New Yorker. But again, my purpose today is not to tell you all of my ideas. I need to hear from every sector, because I want to then take what you're saying and see what our office can do. And let me tell you a couple of things that we're pretty good at. One, we can push this government. Sometimes people don't like that, but someone has to do it. And we can certainly look at agencies and push them so that they can meet your needs. And again, as the person who registers contracts in the city, we also want to hear from all of you. And if there's somehow a feeling that we're not moving fast enough, although I know we are, don't be hesitant to call me, to call Jessica from the office. We want to be partners. And so it's not just about the direct human services that obviously was a priority in the beginning, but every nonprofit, we've got to make sure it survives through this. And we don't want to see this infrastructure collapse because the federal government did not provide resources, or the state government, or in the city budget negotiations. We want to make sure that you're front and center as we go forward.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you for speaking to that. And I do see a few questions about what looks like contract registration. If you could speak to any ability to expedite the contract registration process and oversight of the Department of Education, specifically those that require staff to be in schools in order to receive funds. And I think I'll keep it at that so that we keep it manageable.
Well, look, firstly, I want to expedite contract registration. That's why we're working with the sector. And again, that's why we've been able to expedite the contracts. But I do say to people, while we're trying to do things quicker, I also want to say to the community that we also have to keep receipts. We have to make sure that I'm accounting for the public dollars. So I ask you to understand what my fiduciary role in this has always been. And so we're very committed to continuing that. But I understand that when you hold an agency harmless, we can't, some of the things that you're used to doing, you can't do. And a lot of what you should be doing is remote work. We put out a report today, for example, on the million New Yorkers who are sort of the poorest workers in the city, who are doing work like deliveries and actual hands-on work, whether you're a nurse or you're a transit conductor, whether you're somebody who delivers groceries. I mean, think about it. Everyone's supposed to shelter in place, but somebody's delivering the food. And so I wanted to show today that it's pretty outrageous, for example, that an Amazon worker who goes every day to make sure our deliveries come, they're being paid $15 an hour. I mean, you would think that Jeff Bezos would raise combat pay to $25 or $30. And we're going to have more of those issues for the people that you represent, the people who can't work remotely or don't want to because they want to provide direct services. I was on the phone today because my 86-year-old mom, who's really not well, the nurse wants to come tomorrow and see her. I didn't even know how to reconcile the nurse knocking on my mom's door, given the coronavirus, an 87-year-old woman. And so it took me a lot emotionally to realize that I may never meet this nurse in my life, but I will be grateful to her. But there's a lot better ways to show gratitude, and that is, let's make sure that people have combat pay. Let's make sure that they're safe through this process. Let's make sure there is the appropriate gear to protect the frontline workers in the city. And let's include our not-for-profit community who's in the front lines of this fight. You may not be EMS workers or the people who we traditionally think is the heroes who go into the burning building, but many of you represent people who are actually going into this building, and you're going in with lack of gear. And I do not want to be around again to tell a story as we had to after 9/11, how we let people go in to clean up sites that were not prepared and did not have gear. We've all watched the tragedies of families who lost loved ones because we didn't get it back then. I don't want to see that same mistake with the virus now.
So there's some great questions coming in. A few more. A couple are on how the city is, so we've been monitoring what the city is trying to do for small businesses. Some of those initiatives include nonprofits, some of them do not. So one question is, are you aware that the employee retention program has a limit? The Small Business Services Employee Retention Program has a limit of 1 to 4 employees. Our position, and this question also, our member would like to see that expanded. And then also the loans for small businesses that the city announced a couple weeks ago currently do not include nonprofits. So those are 2 technical questions about eligibility, and then another question about how these different programs are being communicated, and how the city is doing outreach to let us know about these new programs.
Yeah, we put out an analysis of what has to happen for our small business community, and I do agree with the person who's asking the question about incorporating that model. There's a model for businesses and stimulus package that has to be explored, which basically gives a small business a loan, but if that business keeps the same number of employees for the life of this loan, that loan would be converted to a direct payment. That made a lot of sense to me. That should include not-for-profits. Keep in mind, we're still going through the stimulus bill. A lot of the distraction on the bill is because everyone woke up and said, wait a minute, Utah and other places that are not the epicenter of the virus and have relatively small populations, they're getting basically the same, if not more money per capita than New York is. So we're going to have to balance that in the next few weeks. Clearly, Congress has to go back, do another tranche that gives New York the full value of what we need in terms of medical supplies and resources for small businesses and not-for-profits.
Great, thank you. And connected to well, I've been told we're not supposed to call it a stimulus because right now there's nothing to stimulate, so we're calling it a recovery bill. But to a part of the recovery bill, we have a question from an organization that serves immigrants, and from a quick analysis, the Senate bill does not allow the payments to individuals for undocumented individuals. And so is the city looking at ways to support immigrant communities that may have been left out of the federal recovery bill?
So that is at the heart of the matter. The stimulus bill, the federal stimulus bill, and this is not the first time this has happened, always leaves out immigrants and undocumented because the federal government wants to make it clear that they don't exist, even though without these individuals, we would not be an economically viable country or city. The report that I got to get all of you today on our frontline workers talks about the undocumented, the 20% of workers that are uninsured. And I have no optimism that the federal government is going to recognize these workers. So the state and the city in the budget must make good. That's why we need direct cash payments for rent and rent amnesty and rent moratorium. There's a lot of versions that are being debated, but at the end of the day, we have to keep our undocumented workers in their homes so they can feed their families. They should not be used as an excuse to harm the most vulnerable, who, by the way, are the very people I was talking about earlier. They're making the deliveries. They're working in big companies. They're the unsung heroes. And by the way, they're getting on the train and the bus that doesn't run very often, a bus, a train. They're walking the city, getting to places, whether it's to help my mother or some child. And they're the frontline workers who are exposed every which way. I think they should get combat pay. They should not have to pay rent. They should be beyond a minimum wage payment. And we should stop pretending in this country that they don't exist. There's 1 million people in the city, obviously not as many undocumented, but just as important. And that is something that the state and the city government, that's where we have to come in and make it right.
Thank you. So I know that we only have you for a limited amount of time, and I actually want to give Pat a chance to have a dialogue with Comptroller Stringer. Pat, any questions coming up on your end from the New York Community Trust and how philanthropy and government are working through this pandemic and this crisis?
Can I just thank Pat, the resources New York Community Trust is putting out there. That's really, it's great to hear. And I just want to say thank you. You make it easy all the time, Pat. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I guess the only thing I can say to that after that is that we are kind of attuned to the issue of contracts and the fact that the deliverables may have to be, we need some flexibility on the deliverables, given that a lot of organizations are not going to be able to, have X numbers of kids at their after school programs. And in fact, many of the organizations are being asked to do things outside of their contracts. So I'm not sure, Controller, if you have the wherewithal to kind of nudge the city and nudge the Mayor's Office of Contracts on that, but it certainly would be a welcome thing to hear that there's going to be some flexibility.
Well, Pat, there is going to be flexibility. We've been advocating that with the coalition. We got to deal with what's real. And what's real is that this is a city emergency. It's a national emergency. No one is going to game the system in this emergency. And, I always say for those who game it, there'll be a reckoning. But I would say that 99.999% of the people want to deliver services. They're doing it now with great risk. So there should be, and there will be that situation. We are registering the contracts, and we will do everything we can to not get anyone caught up in what in reality they can't deliver on right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Pat, for the Comptroller? Okay, I do have one, an interesting question, Comptroller, if you can speak to a lot of the attention that has been paid on elections and how elections might be impacted by the pandemic, by things closing down. So the April 28th presidential primary, early voting starts April 18th. Do you have any information about what the city is thinking about so that voters can vote safely, get information, and get registered?
So I don't really have any inside information. There is definitely a movement to postpone the elections to June. This is something I feel very strongly about, and we should be mindful, although it's hard to really talk about it today because we have not yet gotten the full surge of the virus. But every nonprofit and every thinking person should just remember history. And when Rudy Giuliani, back after 9/11, basically wanted to postpone the mayoral election for 90 days because he thought he was the only one who could get us through that terrible day and that tragedy, voters, citizens were like, whoa, wait a minute. We decide, we vote, right? We care about our democracy, and we should hold our powers that be, the Board of Elections and others, charge them with making sure we create safe places at a polling place, and our democracy must continue. I don't know what that means today, but it is something that we all have an obligation to always remember. We have a set of rules related to voting. The idea is not to give up on voting or suspend it indefinitely. The idea is to start thinking about this new reality and incorporating it into our democracy. Mandatory absentee ballots, virtual voting. If this is going to be with us, it doesn't mean we suspend democracy. It means we resource a political democracy and make sure people are voting. And that is something that I know it's hard to even imagine, think about right today, given everything we're dealing with. But sometimes I think about it as well, saying this can only go on for so long.
Thank you. Okay, one more technical question going back to contracts before we thank you. So again,
I like the group that thinks about contract justice.
This is definitely one of those groups.
We relate to you. So,
so the DOE, it seems from what we've been hearing, it's harder to get commitments from DOE, and DOE operates somewhat outside of things like the Mayor's Office of Contract Services. We have a technical question about our earned revenue through invoicing schools, so a fee-for-service model classified as a city contract. And then anything else you can speak to about.
We should offline sort of brief with our folks on DOE. You know, DOE is an opaque agency in the best of times. You can only imagine what we're going to uncover when all this is done. I don't think they're moving fast enough on the tablets. As controller, I amended Directive 10 so that those tablets could move to a child's home, and that was the first time we've done that in history. But obviously, there was an article in the Times. It's very disturbing on what's happening with our homeless students. Anything you need me to do to push DOE's button, I'd be happy to do it. And we do this all the time because it's just a huge bureaucracy, and promises made are not always promises kept. So you let me know what you need from us offline, and we'll come up with a strategy on DOE.
We appreciate that. So I know that is about as much time as we have. So thank you so much, everybody virtually. Please thank the comptroller. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for championing the nonprofit sector. Thank you for including us.
Let me just say thank you to all of you for doing everything to make the city get through this. I really look forward in the not too distant future to get together with all of you at a big round table in person and get the city back up and running. So thank you, Chai.
Great. Thank you, comptroller. All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye. Okay. So I saw
Chai,
one.
I think that, let me just say that last question, I think was directed at me because it referenced the fact that for our fund, all right, let me reel it back a little bit. I've been scrolling through the questions, the Q&A, and those that I could answer pretty directly and pretty quickly, I answered. There's a lot of great questions in here. Some of them I'm going to have to get back to you guys on. But this one about DOE and whether they're an invoiced fee for service kind of arrangement could be considered government funding is from the perspective of our COVID-19 fund, because as I mentioned earlier, only organizations that receive government funding are eligible for this fund. And so I will have to get back to you, and then you can circulate my answers to that and other questions on whether a fee-for-service kind of arrangement counts as government funding. And a lot of the questions had to do with that feature of this fund, basically as in why, why is it a requirement to be eligible for this that organizations have government funding? And my short answer to this is I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I've asked that question, but I'm sure there is a rationale. I don't know what it is, but I will try to get back to you all with what it is.
Thank you, Pat. I see another question about the Senate CARE Act that passed around midnight. And then also to your point, Pat, of whatever follow-up information that you'd like us to disseminate, we can do. And then I see a direct question of whether or not, for some of the questions we're not able to answer right now, if we can send out some kind of document or analysis later, we're absolutely happy to try and do that as best we can. I see a question about the 500 employee cap. So this is something that we've been monitoring a lot over the past week. It feels like more than a week, but really about a week. And I would say for the grants, for the loans that operate more like grants under the Senate CARE Act, those are intended for small businesses and nonprofits with employees up to 500. Those are the zero interest loans that are forgiven at the end of December under certain conditions. But because many nonprofits have more than 500 employees, really raised the alarm about this. The newer Senate version that did pass has an option for larger organizations It is not a free loan. It does include, I think, up to a 2% interest rate. And that is called, let me just check really quickly. That's under a different section of the bill. That's the Industry Stabilization Fund. So larger nonprofits with more than 500 staff can apply for those loans. Okay, so we actually had a bit of a dialogue planned. So I'm gonna go back on script, Pat, and kind of circling back to the bigger themes of like how are government and philanthropy responding, what's the role of nonprofits in all of this. One kind of broad question is, how have you seen philanthropy shift and change practices to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic?
I'll give a broad answer to that broad question. And in my opinion, one of the things that philanthropy can do and should do, and I think will do actually, is have more of a voice advocating for the sector in many different kinds of ways. Part of it, obviously, around some of these contract issues that a lot of people have raised. But also part of it, part of it is about visibility. There's a lot of talk about the private sector and sort of getting the private sector to rally behind some of the needs in terms of medical equipment. I haven't heard a lot, maybe I've missed it, about I'm sure that the whole network of care centers that are being set up around the city in the face of schools being closed to take care of children of healthcare professionals, first responders, people that are essential, to the city continuing to operate. That I'm sure is not being done by the private sector. I'm sure that's happening because the city's reaching out to the nonprofit sector. They're stepping up. And that's just one example. I imagine there are many, many, many other examples of ways that the nonprofit sector, is stepping up and leaning into a leadership role in many ways in response to this crisis. And I feel that it's part of our responsibility on the philanthropic side of that sector to make sure people know about that. And to help people, to help these organizations be made whole to the extent that they sacrifice in order to do that.
Great. I'm seeing some more technical questions coming in, so I'll just get to some of these broader theme ones, and then we'll get into those technical ones. And actually, one that I was hoping to close with, that was a recommendation from Meg, our new CEO, is we'd actually really love to hear from members about how you are innovating to meet needs and provide essential services right now, and kind of share in the moment and highlight the resilience and creativity of our sector. So that's what I will move into after asking Pat a couple more questions, and then getting to some of the technical questions that I see coming through the Q&A. So, so another question for you, Pat, is, we've seen a lot of really quick messages from funders, and I was on the Philanthropy New York webinar, what feels like maybe 3 weeks ago, and there were funders talking about like, what do we need to do to be able to lift restrictions? And they moved really quickly. So, on the nonprofit side, we're like, that's amazing. In terms of things like lifting restrictions, and what enduring lessons do you think, enduring lessons and changes for philanthropy might we see as a result of this crisis beyond things like general operating support?
Well, again, I have to speak from my own experience, and as everybody knows, I'm sure, every funding institution is different, operates differently. But one thing I think has been interesting is the recognition that crises like these have legs. And I think the tendency for boards, for foundation boards, you know, for me, for people in my role, is to want to jump in and do something really quickly, like right away, like let's do something. And I think one thing that, you know, I've been schooled about, and I'm sort of, you know, realizing now and respecting the perspective that the public health crisis, you know, God willing, will not go more than a few months, you know, maybe a year, you know, hopefully not much longer than that. But the economic crisis that results from this is going to last for a very long time. And so we have to be cognizant of the reality that not all needs are going to be immediately apparent. And I think that in, you know, on the philanthropic side, it's kind of, we've got to resist the temptation to want to jump in and do something and sort of shoot all of our resources before having the benefit of understanding from you all what is going on, what are the needs, what are the short-term, mid-term, and long-term needs. So I hope that that's one of the lessons that we take away from this.
Yeah, well, it sounds like one of the themes I'm hearing from both you and from Comptroller Stringer is tell you, right? Like tell you what,
Yes.
what we're seeing, what we're needing as a sector.
Yes.
And, you know, I think for organizations like Nonprofit New York that have memberships, you know, we want to hear from our members too. So I will just reiterate and stress that, you know, hold us accountable. And so my final question before getting into some of the technical questions from the Q&A is any final thoughts on what else you think needs to happen for us to sustain nonprofits through the pandemic and the likely recession?
I think there's going to inevitably be some, unfortunately, there's going to be some organizations that will need to look for strategies for combining resources, for, you know, merging, collaborating, whatever that looks like. Because I think that, you know, clearly from the government side, we're going to take a pretty big hit in terms of tax revenue. And, you know, that's just reality. And from the philanthropic side, now the New York Community Trust is a community foundation, and so we're a little bit of a different animal, but even the community foundations, but especially the private foundations, family foundations, you know, if Wall Street, if the stock market, you know, stays as depressed as it has been, it's gonna impact grant making ability eventually, probably not this year, but next year for sure. So the resources are going to shrink. So organizations are going to have to strategize about how you respond to that. You know, it's sort of an inevitable long-term impact on the sector, I think.
Thank you for that. Okay, so I was trying to scroll through. I lost a few of the ones that I thought I was going to be answering.
Can I ask you, or is it possible for me to get, I'm old school, can I get a printout of the Q&A?
I think so.
I've got it, and there are some questions that were really good ones, and
they
they deserve an answer, and I just don't have the answer, and I don't want to make it up and then be wrong. So
agreed.
If you can send me a printout of it, and I'll try my best to get back to you guys in a short amount of time with some answers.
I see my colleagues nodding. Is that okay? I am not the most Zoom savvy, but I see my colleagues nodding, so I'm going to say hopefully yes. I saw a question about whether or not we were going to be doing, you know, future programming around things like applying for the relief efforts. That is something we're definitely talking about. I think for us, kind of the immediate need is to stabilize the sector and to see what all the pieces are that fall into place. One of the biggest ones we were waiting to see was the federal response, and now we'll have to wait and see what the state, we'll have to lend our voices to what the state and city do. But yes, we are interested in, we're getting a lot of questions and requests, so we are interested in doing more programming about that.
And I'm glad you said that, because it reminded me that I forgot to mention what was the main message I wanted to leave with everyone, which is that I'm told that the application for this fund has been made as simple and streamlined as imaginable. And so people, if there is any, inkling at all to take a chance and to apply, you should, because there's not a lot of effort and time that is going to be required to complete the application, and the turnaround time is very quick. So you don't have much to lose in terms of the effort into it and the time waiting to know.
Thank you, Pat. That's good.
Okay.
That's great to leave us with. I want to circle back now to that question I posed for people to start thinking about. So please use the chat function for this. You can do this to all attendees. How are you innovating right now to meet needs and provide essential services? And how can we highlight all of your resilience and creativity as we get through this together?
And I would like, if I can, ask for a some kind of a recording of that as well. That would be very interesting for us to have too. And I'll sign off at this point.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
For your trust.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. So I'm seeing our first chats coming in. So New York Peace Institute has rapidly transitioned to providing free remote conflict resolution services. That's amazing. Other ways that you're innovating. Helping to keep Zoom overloaded. Yes, we are. That is correct. Zoom all day, every day. We asked kids in our programs for their needs and interests and created a virtual platform. Amazing. Girls on the Run NYC is providing social and emotional learning at home via English, Spanish PDFs and YouTube videos for 3rd to 8th grade girls. Soul Sisters will be hosting a youth virtual healing space on Zoom with cybersecurity measures. Welcome. Hi, Princess. I could not be possibly prouder of the work being done by Covenant House, New York senior leadership and direct service staff. Many direct service workers are coming in on rotation, 2 to 3 staff members per program at a time, working 2 to 3 days on site and the rest off. Lots of use of virtual counseling, case management, education. That certainly sounds like resilience and innovation. And additionally, free academic tutoring services through Zoom for our young artists as they go through remote learning. Converting many of our site programs to online. We're hearing definitely a theme there. The Interfaith Center of New York is gathering examples of online worship services. Yes, I've seen that in different faith traditions and other creative ways that congregations are using to stay in touch. The dance TikTok virtual vibe space, that sounds fun. Using Instagram Live to convene and keep in touch with youth. Our staff have, although I don't know if we would identify as youth, we have been participating in some Instagram Live parties together. The Advocacy Institute is increasing its digital presence with more webinars and online tools. Girl Be Heard, converting curriculum for virtual delivery, up and running in our weekend programming and main stage rehearsal, working on it for after school. Creating campaigns for kids to share their creative stories or video clips. Creating a hotline for parents and teachers needing support. This is amazing. All of this, so inspiring. Providing after-school program online using Zoom, building interactive play programming, parent support groups, and bedtime story hours. Behind the Book just had its first virtual literacy workshop today. Students met with the author of the book to discuss his work writings. The biggest issue is lower grade students having access to computers and laptops. Yes, we are hearing that. Something to funnel up to the DOE. Ackerman Institute providing teletherapy fit for families and workshops online for mental health. Very important. We've been seeing the increased need as our social world has completely changed. Staples is designating an essential vendor. Lymphatic Education and Research Network is offering a live stream about self-care. Cause Effective, providing convening and supporting. I am checking my checking my time because I'm like, ooh, these are coming in a little faster than I can keep up with. So I am going to actually, with this, I love all of these. It's super inspiring. This is leaving us on such a positive note in this time where we really, really need it. So thank you all so, so much. I'm actually gonna take a little bit of a break and see if others want to jump in from Nonprofit New York.
I just want to say how amazing it is to hear what everyone in the sector is doing. Please keep the stories coming. We will share them in our member newsletter. We will share them on social media. We really want to let folks know just how resilient and innovative we are. And as Chai is reading, I'm like smiling and nodding and taking notes about all of the programming that I'm gonna need to also access. And so definitely please keep them coming. We will compile them and share them with all of you, as well as with our membership and the sector.
Absolutely. So I'm so sorry if I wasn't able to get to your program. This is really amazing. I feel like it's just what we need right now. We need to feel inspired. You all are inspiring us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anything else from my fellow colleagues?
Chai, I want to thank you for what you have done. You look as if you might have actually slept within the last 2 weeks, but based on the flow of emails that I've been seeing, I'm not quite sure when you have slept. And what you've been doing to convene our sector is absolutely what we're about. We can only be a relentless force to good with the relentless work that all of our team does. You're seeing here Melkis, Taina, and Chai, and they're supported by the rest of our team. So I want to thank you. As you flow ideas in, one of the big challenges I know that we're all having is how to create revenue from programs that we may now need to offer only remotely. So if you have ideas and experiences on how to monetize what you're receiving, a lot of what you're doing for free for those in need, and that is hugely important. But it's also important that those who can afford to provide support to you so that you can keep doing what you are doing. One of our key tenets is that nonprofits should be able to have the resources that we need in order to do what we do. We're all suffering in that way, and there's a responsibility for many to give funds. Government has encouraged many of our arts organizations to provide a lot of art to culture to all of us stuck in our homes without paying for it. And if there's a way that you can figure out how to get paid for it, we'd like to know about it so that we can share that with others. But I want to thank you. Can we go to the next slide, which has a few, I guess this one, yes. Thank you. Chai is keeping our COVID-19 page populated. What he planned to say last night changed overnight to some extent as activity in Washington provided new information for us. And I have no doubt that it will change and continue to change each day. We are continuing to provide our trainings. Some of what we provide is free, some of what we provide is for payment. But I very much encourage you to take part. And if, as some of you noted today, there are things that you would like us to be doing, areas where we can be helpful, areas where we can provide useful dialogue and information, please let us know. Our goal is to support the entire sector in every way that we can. We're only a small group, but we produce lots of support for you and want to continue to be able to do that. You will see on here that applications for the 2020 Nonprofit Excellence Awards are open. We really encourage you to consider applying for that. I'm told by many people who have not won that the application and the process is almost as important as winning. I don't believe the thing they say when they suggest that winning isn't important, but I know that organizations learn a lot through the application process of how to be excellent. And for those of you who are not members today, I very much encourage you to become a member. With that, I think we will bring our annual meeting for 2020 to a close. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Ian.
Just want to say, reiterate what Pat Swan said. We will compile all the questions and make sure that she gets them, so that way she can answer the ones that she can and get back to folks. And again, we will also compile all the stories and we'll share those as well. Marcus, do you have some like closing things about what we're going to do with the webinar and things like that?
I think Ian covered it. We're going to be announcing some new trainings in the coming weeks. And we're also trying to update our Knowledge Center with COVID-related resources. So if you search COVID-19 in our Knowledge Center, you'll be equipped with quite a number of resources that we're adding daily. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Malchus.
Hey, that went beautifully.
Are we, is it over? I still see, I see folks still logging off, so I just wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well done, guys.
Wait, are
Well
we still
done.
recording?
Oh yeah, let me stop that.
That'll be the bloopers.
I'm not sure how to. I'm not sure how to.
I think if you move to where it says recording, there's like
Yes.